Hello, I'm Curtis A. Routley, and I'd like to thank you for coming to the Running Prophecy channel and joining me on the teachings that I'm posting on Bible prophecy, which can be found in my book, Running Prophecy, by the same name as this channel. This is lesson number 16, the Alpha to Omega Biblical Timeline, Part 2. You might call it the rest of the puzzle. Now, in the last lesson, I brought you through the 1,656 years that went from the creation of man to the flood. Now, this is not the creation of the planet, but the creation of man, the count of Adam, and the years of his life that began the counting process. And then I took you after the flood for a period of 1,471 years until the glory cloud filled the house of the Lord that King Solomon had built when he brought the Ark of the Covenant into the temple. And the glory cloud filled the house of the Lord and prevented the priests from ministering. And from this point, we have another sequence of the Bible's prophetic run. And before I get into it, I want to bring to your attention the question that King Solomon asked in Ecclesiastes 8:7. If someone does not know what is going to happen, how can another tell him when it's going to take place? If you do not know the what, you will not know the when. If you know a what without a when, you don't know a what. Every one of the Lord's events that have something special and unique attached to them have a built-in when it's going to happen. And it's the purpose of these two lessons to teach you this series of events, so that you can see and understand the whens that are going to take place. Now bear with me for just a moment as I change the angle of the camera and bring the chart for today into focus and view so that you'll be able to see and understand the sequence of events of Bible prophecy that will take us from the day that the glory cloud filled the house of the Lord and prevented the priests from ministering to the last day. So from the first day of creation, we run to the last day for this heaven and this earth and their destruction and the events that take place immediately thereafter. We began with a passage in the book of Daniel, chapter 8, verses 13 and 14. How long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply, while the transgression causes horror so as to allow both the holy place and the host to be trampled? And he said to me, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the holy place will be properly restored. A 2,300-day time period. But the ending place was when Jerusalem was restored, when the holy place was returned to the people of Israel. And I pointed out earlier that the ending of the 1,260-day period has exactly this same ending description, the restoration of the holy place to the people of Israel. And I made a conclusion that the ending of the 2,300-day period was exactly the same as the ending of the 1,260-day period. They both ended on the same day. Now that means that the 2,300-day period started 1,040 days before the 1,260-day period began, because it takes 1,260 and 1,040 to equal 2,300 days to present the run from the calendar. Now the 1260-day period went from 70 AD, when the temple was destroyed on the 9th of Av, the 4th of August in 70 AD, until the Jews got Jerusalem back in 1967. And I've showed you that this is a relationship of 1 day for 1.5 years, because the time period from 70 AD to 1967 was 1,897 years. And if we remove the 7 of the God factor from that period, we have 1,890 years, which is exactly 1.5 times 1260. But on the other side, the 1,040 days does not have the same time period run. Its period was determined by Sir Charles Anderson in his book The Coming Prince, when he went through the 69 weeks of Daniel chapter 9 verses 24 through 26. And from Nehemiah chapter 2 verse 1, that period began in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, which was the year of 445 BC. And he took the 69 times 7 times 360, and then in effect divided by 365.2425, and you go back. You have a total period then of 445 plus 32 AD, which is 477 years. And the 69 weeks ended when the Messiah was cut off in 32 AD. And he says this went from the issuing of a decree to his death exactly to the day. So the relationship before the temple was destroyed in 70 AD to the Jew was 1 day to 1 year of 360 days each. So if we have 1,040 days that encompass a year at 360 days each, we take 1,040 times 360, divide that by 365.2425, and we have 1,025 years. 1,025 years before 70 AD is 956 BC. That's the year the ark entered King Solomon's temple, and the glory cloud filled the house of the Lord and prevented the priests from ministering. Now there's another time period that ran during this 1,040 days, and it was 430 days spoken of in Ezekiel chapter 4 verses 1 through 7, where Ezekiel was told to take a brick, write the name Jerusalem on it, and erect a wall between his face and that brick, and then he'd lay down on his left side for 390 days and on his right side for 40 days, for a total of 430 days, where there would be no word that would go from Israel to God, and no word would go from God to Israel. They would bear their own iniquity. And the 430-day period began with the death of Malachi, the last Old Testament prophet, in 433 BC. And this 430-day period winds up being 427 years. So John the Baptist and Jesus were then born in 6 BC, and John the Baptist was born in the 1st month of the Jewish calendar, and Jesus was born in the 7th month of the Jewish calendar, on the 10th day of the month, because Jesus had to be born on the Day of Atonement, because he was going to atone for sin. And so then we have Daniel chapter 12. And in Daniel chapter 12 we have 3 time periods. The first one is given as time, times, and half a time. And in the book of the Revelation, we also find times, times, and half a time, 42 months and 1,260 days, representing the same period that went from the temple being destroyed until the Jews getting Jerusalem back in 1967. But then Daniel also said the abomination of desolation would occur on day 1290, and blessed is he that attained unto the 1335th day, which is the last day on the biblical calendar. Now in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, we see that the 70th week, the last part of the 69-week period, the abomination of desolation appears in the middle of the 70th week, and it also appears, therefore, on day 1290. So I have concluded that the 70th week sits on day 1290 like a goalpost. And day 1290 begins with a peace treaty being signed over Ezekiel's Israel on day 1286 and a half, and a time period that I had proposed when I drew this chart of a 2014-2015 time period. Well, 2014 has now ended and 2015 is here. So the events leading up to Ezekiel's Israel, the first lesson in this series, are upon us. And after day 1290, we have the 3.5 days at the end of the 70th week, Israel's Great Tribulation, and Jesus returns to the planet to set up his kingdom at the end of the 70th week. At the end of this period, we also find out that when the devil is jailed, the 391 days of preparation for the 4 angels who were preparing at the Euphrates River to fight in the Battle of Armageddon was completed by the time they were jailed. So their start was at 1461 as when the time periods began for these 4 that were acting around the river Euphrates. In Revelation chapter 9, verse 5, we learn that the time for the locust was 150 days. Now, if you accept the teaching that I gave that the locust were man's modern means of land transportation, you'll accept the fact that the locusts make it to the last day. So 150 days before that point in time is when their power began. Now, day 1260 is 75 days from day 1335, and 75 days the other side is day 1185. And day 1185 is the year 1855, when the steam locomotive was greedily promoted to move men and machinery over the face of the earth. Then you have in 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 5, that King David ruled for 7.5 years in Hebron and 33 years in Jerusalem, and the total reign that David had was 40.5 years. And Jesus is going to be ruling on King David's throne, and King David is returning with him when he returns. And 7.5 and 33 and 3.5 added to 1290 bring us to the end of day 1334. Now in Daniel chapter 7, Daniel said in verses 13 and 14, I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming. And he came up to the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him, and to him was given a kingdom, glory, and a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, and men of every language might serve him. When Jesus returns at the end of the 70th week, he's coming to be the King of Israel. At the end of day 1334, he goes back to his Father in heaven, and he's crowned the King of the whole earth. When he returns from that coronation ceremony, the 7th trumpet sounds, the dead in Christ rise, the living believers are removed from the planet. Everyone left behind is killed without exception. When all the wicked are dead, all the wicked who ever were are resurrected. And then this heaven and this earth are destroyed and done away with. And they are no more, and the judgment sits. Now, Muhammad told his followers one thing that was absolutely true. You are going to go through the judgment. He just did not know what the judgment meant, and none of his followers do either. But in John chapter 5, verse 29, Jesus said there's a resurrection of the righteous and one to the judgment. The righteous don't go to the judgment, the wicked do. So all of Muhammad's followers, therefore, by definition, are among the wicked, and not a single one of them will rise in the resurrection and the rapture. So when you look at the Bible and its time periods, if you do not understand what is going to take place, how will you ever see when it occurs? How will you know what's taking place? And will you be prepared for the things that are coming? If you do not know the what, how can someone teach you the when? But now I have taught you the biblical whens and the biblical whats, and I hope you will be ready on that day.